Something I've noticed with many indie games is that people are exceptionally drawn to the ones featuring horror and misery, but not in the ways you might expect. There are plenty of games being released now that hit the sweet spots of the PS1 era and beyond with fixed cameras and tank controls, but the more abstracted interpersonal projects like Yume and Nikki have created an outcry of people interested in a different kind of horror, a kind defined by isolation, surrealism, being left to your own devices. If you throw a rock at almost any horror indie game, there's a strong chance you will hit something inspired by Off or Undertale. These games aren't exactly scary, so much as they are introspective and dreamlike. Buckets of blood exchanged for a sixth sense of unease and paranoia. The macabre set pieces of Yume and Nikki, the peering horror of I'm scared, the isolation of being left alone in an MMO world meant to populate thousands, Alone in Gary's mod. These feelings persist and have forged a genre all on their own. But where did they come from? What game can be considered the allfather of this phenomenon? There's a game called FunnyPizzaLand, a game you may have heard of since huge YouTubers like PewDiePie and Oddheader shone light on its eccentricities. But despite all this, the story of its creation and distribution is shrouded in mystery. People can't even decide when this game came out, let alone who created it. Popular online evidence of its existence only indicated a 2011 or 2012 release, but all the in-game files claim it was released back in 2002, 2 years before Yume and Nikki, making FunnyPizzaLand a contender to predate the kind of isolating exploration genre made popular through RPG Maker horror games of old, the more cryptic aspects of its existence bordering on lost media. The game is as cryptic and mysterious as they come, and no one can fully explain what this game is trying to say or when it was made, but I can. If you stick with me to the end, I will give you all the answers to any questions you could ever have about this game, many of which will probably shock you, if you weren't already shocked, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than anyone could have ever predicted. Hey, my name is Peter. I make videos on strange, obscure, and underrated games like this all the time, so consider liking the video and subscribing for more videos like these. Perhaps even joining my Patreon to get early access to videos, exclusive videos not available anywhere else, and to get your name in the video with the Jawcoin tier. Embrace yourselves, brothers and sisters. This rabbit hole is deeper than hell.
Hey yo, the pizza here! Oh, nigga! My ears burn!
If you're confused by the mere existence of a game like this, don't worry, that's natural. It seems like a game that only exists in the background of a television show, a nightmare brought to life by Blender and Adderall. How does one even go about explaining a game like this? Well, it's complicated. Let me take you back all the way to August 16th, 2011. A channel called Roman uploaded a video called FunnyPizzaLand 3D Game 2002, with a link to an itch.io page containing the titular FunnyPizzaLand 3D game, as well as a link to the creator's website. This is the game's creator, Roman, a very mysterious figure in his own right. His website, gobbogos.com, doesn't reveal much, or anything at all really. We'll circle back to it later. As it stands, this video has nearly 100,000 views after 13 years since uploaded, but the game didn't exactly make waves in the indie game community, or horror game community, or any community. It was a very low-key release, only being discussed on forums and eventually Reddit. The game didn't pick up much traction until PewDiePie and then Vinny Vinesauce played it in 2015. Normally I would use the itch.io link, but the game was actually uploaded to Steam in 2022. Quite the kind courtesy of Roman to put on a real platform. Sorry, I just hate downloading stuff from anywhere that isn't Steam. Even from the title of the trailer, there's a weird emphasis on the year 2002. Perhaps a method of marketing, a way to sell the fact that it's meant to look like a game from 2002? Only one way to find out. Oh. It doesn't work. FunnyPizzaLand is infamous for not working well on modern machines, so I highly recommend you run the game in Windows XP compatibility mode. It was also a nightmare to try and record, so please excuse the hideous resolution. So the intro movie is really something, alright. One could generously call it multimedia because of its mix of traditional drawings, some really interesting 3D animation, and live action footage. Looks like this ghoulish monstrosity is our main character, Pedro, and he's upset because he's broke as a joke. To obtain some cash, he finds a 100,000 euro bounty for someone or something called the Global Media Monster, some kind of TV head monster on legs. We're dropped in this incredibly rudimentary 3D environment with our hero, I use that word lightly, in this empty, lonely world. Primitive, simple, there are a lot of ways to describe the visuals of FunnyPizzaLand, but I think it conveys an emotion that doesn't exist. I mean, just look at Pedro. What do you want me to say? The texture work is brutish, the animation's wonky and jarring. This is on its face a repugnant looking game, but it's dripping in atmosphere in a way I can't describe. Every location and environment is claustrophobic, dark, gloomy, generally upsetting and unpleasant. The skyboxes are so squashed and dreary that it's difficult to navigate without feeling like you're being watched. Something about this game screams, roars even, dead MMO, like the crude environments were designed to house 1,000 players, but you're the only one left. There's so much empty space, it leaves room for contemplation and reflection. It feels like a tech demo that was abandoned early in development, which would certainly explain why Pedro walks at the rate of corpse decomposition in A poses the entire time. I'm making it look easy, but the controls of this game are outrageous. It has tank controls, and WASD controls the camera, not your movement. At one click at a time, one disorienting click at a time, you have to use the arrow keys to move and to jump? Guess. No, seriously guess. It's the home key. Yes, the home key. I don't even think I've ever used this key in my life for anything ever. Why would you make that the jump button? You can't even rebind it! So you're playing this game with both hands in the same area of your keyboard. Better get used to it because there will be platforming. I've avoided the elephant in the room for far too long. We need to talk about this music track. It's simply called Hall, and it's as eerie as it is somehow whimsical. It makes me feel a mix of disturbance, but also a little euphoria. The soundtrack to a Brothers Grimm fable, something macabre and unsettling, but still makes you feel like you're going on an adventure. There's joy and wanderlust mixed in with terror, an impressive blend of feelings. We eventually make it to this gate, which you have to open by touching this gear and then pressing spacebar to interact with the gate. Something you will very quickly notice is that basically every single track in this game is a loop lasting only a couple seconds. Hall at least had the decency to be 20 seconds, but we don't get that luxury here. This farty trombone, whatever instrument is being played, is something you should probably get used to. Here's our pizza shop, Pedro's Pizza, home of Pedro's Pizza and Pedro's Pizza pizza truck, which we can't access. This specific environment is disgusting and has the color palette of an abandoned truck stop toilet bowl with the sounds to go with it. But where do we go from here? You aren't gonna like this map. It's, looks like we're here? Very bold choice to not have an indicator of where you are on this map, making it next to useless. The UI choices are brash as they are trash. The text goes off the border of these pizza platters, almost blending into outright with the color. It's like something out of Cruelty Squad decades before Cruelty Squad. So you just have to take a chance on one of those winding roads to end up in a stone maze you have to navigate, all while avoiding these golem-like creatures. The crickets overpower the music playing, and combined with the fact you take no damage from these monsters, I feel like I've been totally abandoned in this world, with incomplete game mechanics and music, the absence of God. The camera is not a pleasant thing to fiddle with. Having to hammer down WASD to move it is bad enough, but it only moves in short increments. It makes me almost sick to rotate it where I want to be. I will say it's cleverly used in this section with the dungeon or castle, which is entirely submerged in darkness, Pedro only visible through the windows. But rotating it the other way gives you an entirely new dimension to feast on. The lighting in this game is shockingly dynamic, even when engulfed in shadow. Pedro is still visible. Things that need to be emphasized are lit like a diorama or stage play. They hog the light, which makes everything feel kind of false and manufactured in a way. Like we're inside of a sketchy Latin American pizza restaurant commercial instead of a piece of commercial software meant to be played. We meet this character named Morak Mum in a cutscene, who explains that the global media monster character won some kind of war 5 years ago, resulting in her son being kidnapped and tortured, which means we have to go save him, since we're aiming for the global media monster anyways. That's such a specific name, Global Media Monster, like something you would hear on Alex Jones. The cutscenes are especially gruesome to behold. Characters twist and morph at the slightest provocation, like their models are about to combust at any point. Pedro himself looks like a mixture of Philip from Space Funeral and the Hamburger Lady from that one throbbing Gristle song. Maybe Curly. Unnerving doesn't do it justice. These are CGI monstrosities that got rejected from Courage the Cowardly Dog and thrown into an indie game for further use. Regardless, we get our van key, and with that we can drive our Hellcat to the next section here, which requires platforming. I didn't mention it until now, but you can b-hop with Pedro. But the truck is somehow better at b-hopping than Pedro is, which means you have to tap the home button as you control the arrow keys to steer across this gap. But if you press right mouse click, it disables the cursor, and you can sort of steer yourself without the arrow keys for an alternative control scheme. Was it intentional? I don't know if anything in this game was intentional or not. We can find a catacomb with a plate of sausages we can snag if we just steer the whip directly into a pool, which does not affect its ability to drive whatsoever. It's like there was planned game mechanics that just never made it past the conceptual stage, stuck here for our enjoyment? Returning the truck to the store, we venture to the only place unexplored, a farmland where we can find a chicken and a cow, the most normal parts of this entire game. Inside, we can meet this little slice of heaven, Duty Free. Yes, that is her name, Duty Free. She explains where to find Morak Mum and... Wait, was I supposed to go here first? Yeah, FunnyPizzaLand is technically non-linear. I found the sausages we need to give this freak of nature and Morak Mum well before I went here. But you don't actually need to visit Duty Free at all, as far as I know. Also, the land you inhabit is literally called FunnyPizzaLand, like that's its name. What would you call its citizens? A Pizzalander? Once we obtain the bratwursts, we can enter what looks like a medieval village, complete with what I believe to be a Mozart piece. Weirdly fitting, somehow. We're floating in this black void, totally enclosed in darkness. There's an intentional disregard for player immersion in this game. It wants to look jarring and unconvincing as humanly possible, to be intentionally missing skyboxes and convincing textures, to look haphazard and disgusting, to feel weird about the fact that you can stand on water and not die. I don't even know if there's a name of this aesthetic, but FunnyPizzaLand is seriously the only example of it out there. Platforming might seem like a great challenge, and it certainly can be with the frustrating camera, but if you just take baby steps up the stairs and jump across the platforms, you will be fine. It's not too demanding, just unnecessarily stressful with this Thulian control style. The home key just puts a text cursor at the start of a page in a Word doc. Why does this key even exist on a keyboard, let alone be used as the jump key? What were you thinking, Roman? Making it across the chasm and meeting... I don't know what that is. We have to lower a drawbridge, but for the love of Jaw, hammer this button down several times, because the drawbridge has a nasty trait of getting stuck and halting progress for no reason at all. This game kind of has the Postal 2 and Stalker situation, where most of the bugs and jank featured is really funny and kind of adds to the experience in a way, but some of them are outright frustrating and not funny at all. Like, all three of these games being a pain in the ass to record with OBS is really not that entertaining. It actually kind of pisses me off. The torture chamber is brought to life with Morak Mum's son screams by this monk figure, which we can stop if we scale to the top of the dungeon, getting a good look at the global media monster in the tube, and reading some interesting graffiti. We free the son, Spencer, that's just a really funny name, Spencer, and obtain extra pizza power. Whatever that means. I don't think I've seen this man deliver a single pizza once in this game. Why doesn't he just deliver pizzas if he wants money? Is he stupid? But we're on to the final conflict with the global media monster, and I think I'll let the final battle speak for itself. So, I guess extra pizza power was just a gun to blow out the monster's brains. If it works, it works. Pedro presumably collects the bounty, marries Duty Free, and they live happily ever after. I think. The game ends with Pedro in a room by himself with a TV, with no way to get out. What do I even say about this game? Reactions vary. Some people write it off as a sloppy but somewhat charming game made to resemble an early 2000s project, while others are genuinely deeply disturbed by the ambience, the loneliness, the surrealism. And I can see where both sides are coming from. It is a very short game, lasting around 30 minutes if you're sharp, and I don't see a lot of replay value, but this is a visual feast for the eyes in the most revolting way possible. There is not another game on Earth that looks like this, feels like this, the slapdash mixture of a classic hero's tale in the late 90s PlayStation demo that never came out. You're left to question how much of whatever emotion this game makes you feel is an intentional artistic design or a result of being potentially unfinished and broken. Like you have to decipher the meaning of an ancient lost tablet. There doesn't seem to be any sun, you can walk on water. The logic of this game is broken, at least aesthetically. Humans are naturally fearful of things that don't make sense, and this is a particularly nonsensical adventure, a horrifying pizza pie. It gives off that kind of wet, dry world vibe, a feeling of being lost and confused in a very crude environment with mangled, unintelligible skyboxes, or a King Fields 1 dreamlike wonderland feeling. Nothing about FunnyPizzaLand feels real. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that a lot of people don't find this game scary, but quite the opposite, they find it funny. Something about the uncanny valley is that just as many people are likely to find something human-like entertaining instead of terrifying. Your brain has to be wired a certain way. Think of it like this. Are you afraid of xenomorphs? Or are you a Dead by Daylight player? There was an intentionally designed spectrum of fear, but also getting a little hard with the aliens. The only game I could even remotely compare FunnyPizzaLand to at the moment is Garage Bad Dream Adventure. Both are computer games focusing on eerie and surreal exploration, very underground indie projects. But FunnyPizzaLand never saw a huge resurgence of fans like Garage did. But there is an underlying mystery to the game that is yet to be fully explained. When was this game made? Part of this game's appeal, I use that word very lightly, and marketing is that the game was created in 2002. But what evidence do we have for that? Well, it was created in 3D Game Studio, a 3D game development software that you can use to create your own games, naturally, and it uses the A5 version, which was released in the year 2000. Going into the game files, we can find various pieces of traditional art from Roman, the creator, as well as a video file called Roman.1999. Not exactly a subtle implication of when it was made, unless the creator titled it that to really sell the fact he wants people to think it was made in 2002. But why do so many people question its authenticity? Well, I've mentioned the public online records of this game only popped up in 2011 and 2012, much later than 2002. The itch.io page cropped up around that time frame, providing some credence to that theory. When the game was first getting quote-unquote mainstream exposure, it was discussed on Reddit, most often on the subreddit r/creepygames, which doesn't discuss outright horror games, but myths, creepypastas, obscure games. It's more about the culture of the games and the products themselves. Many people in this thread, which was referenced heavily in the Odd Header video that came out years later, doubted the authenticity of the 2002 claim, claiming it was just a tagline aesthetic meant to sell the game, but I take some issues with that theory. Think about it. When games try and market themselves as being made in a certain era, how do the creators go about that? Usually it's a visual callback, like how all these PS1 style horror games are all the rage now, but they're made with modern software just emulating that feel. But Roman clearly used a piece of 2000 software and was able to almost perfectly replicate the visual style of a crude early 3D modeling game, which would have been one hell of a job well done if this was merely emulating an era instead of being developed in it. But there's always a stink about games made to resemble another era of games, something that always gives it away as an inspirational piece. You can tell all these new PSX horror games are made in the 2020s because almost all of them use a Resi door opening animation or try and be Silent Hill. These games wear their inspirations on their sleeves, which is not a bad thing at all, just indicative of the mindset of the developers. They wanted to emulate a style they admire, but I can't see anything like that for FunnyPizzaLand. The game is so confusing and abstract that even if Roman was inspired by a particular 2000s product creating it, would you even be able to tell? A lot of people are genuinely disturbed by this game. I asked my subscribers through a community post how they felt about it. What I found didn't entirely surprise me, but further steeled my conviction. People reported that it didn't really seem scary, but unnerving, a powerful icon in the uncanny valley. Especially this specific screenshot I provided. There's something definitely unsettling about the makeup of this game, down to its code. It feels like a living, breathing creepypasta. I want to highlight a specific comment here. Guck Fugel, great name, explains how the third screenshot reminds him of a highly specific nightmare he had in first grade being eaten by zombies. It's the lighting that got me. It's the same colors as the streetlights in the dream. There's something specific FunnyPizzaLand touches on. Something primal, psychological, the vast dark expanse of the human mind in its grasp, and Pedro is molding it into a delicious pizza pie. Well, maybe not that delicious. This is all becoming hearsay and opinions. No one seems to fully know if this game was actually created in 2002 like Roman claims. But if it was, then we could be looking at something light years ahead of its time. Something so ahead of the curve that this game genre of disturbing exploration kind of games might owe part of their existence to Pedro. But recall the itch.io site. It links to the Gobbo's website, and in 2012, when the site was created, it linked to another one of Rowan's games, called Gobbo Goes Adventures, which eventually got a Steam release in 2023. Perhaps we can find our answers here.
Pizza time.
Gobbo Goes Adventures retains some of Roman's disturbing 3D modeling abilities, but takes a far departure from being a puzzle platformer in a post-industrial comic style. Instead, it's an isometric puzzle game entirely controlled with the mouse. I believe it was at least partially browser-based on that website. But what is Gobbo about? Actually, I don't know. You're just dropped in and left to pick up the clues. Literally pick them up. This game is entirely controlled by mouse clicks, so you have to click around the map to move Gobbo around, as well as pick up objects to interact with the various puzzles. This becomes an issue right away because sometimes you need to bring objects from one side of the map to the other, but also walk there, and that's the same button. So I keep dragging it across the screen, then stopping to walk, and vice versa. Doesn't seem like there's any inventory system either. I really don't know why the game was designed like this, but it's immensely frustrating. I will say the game's visuals are super intriguing. Gobbo is a 3D model, but everything else is hand-drawn. I'm surprised at how well Robin's cubism and, ugly style translates into video games. PizzaLand had almost none of that because of how primitive the models were. But now with 2012 software, whatever software this game was made with, Roman was far more gracefully able to translate his art style, and I think it's as brutishly charming as it is distinctive. The sky reflecting off the ground is a very captivating sight. Everything feels glossy, if that makes sense. Something you need to understand about this game is that there are no verbal instructions whatsoever on where to go. You're just thrown into the screen, you need to find your way out. There are a couple items you can grab around to no effect, but this thing here turns into a balloon-shaped globe when you bring it over this pipe. How are you supposed to know that? Great question. We can choose our locations from this globe, which leads us to different areas with a single puzzle to solve each. And I'm just gonna cut to the chase here, I don't like this game very much. Take this poo-poo land, for example. There's a part where you get trapped in this section and have to time this bug creature to sting the flying devil to free you, with this flower able to sort of delay the bug's attack pattern. However, actually pulling this off is almost impossible. I wasn't recording the first time around when I did it, and I honestly was not able to replicate it on camera in 10 minutes of trying. This puzzle is a prime example of what's going on with this game. Moon logic. Some of the tasks you expect to figure out are outrageous, and not in a funny way whatsoever. Some are easy, like putting an oil into a chainsaw and using that chainsaw to cut down a wire hanger to force open a lock. But then there's this stupid quest where you have to get a robot cat down from a pole. So naturally we attach a stick to its tail, find a nuclear waste bin to dunk inside of a water bucket and put inside a robot to kill the cat. Then use a mouse trap to kill a mouse off to the side and stuff the trapped mouse into a mailbox, which also includes some kind of poisonous item to bring the cat back to life to complete the quest. How are you supposed to know this other than just blowing way too much time on total guesswork experimentation? The entire game operates on logic like this. Just wild assumptions and expectations that no sane person would ever be able to make, with zero guidance whatsoever. These items are scattered all over the map, so you have to painstakingly drag them around with you in that tedious method I described earlier, and then just experiment with them for an unsatisfying reward. Whatever way you look at it, it's unintuitive and just not fun. Also, most areas don't even have music, just the sound of wind blowing and what I think is a typewriter? FunnyPizzaLand, for how short its tracks were, at least aided the atmosphere and general ambience. Here, it just felt like audio was a guilt-tripped inclusion, secondary. I understand the appeal is that there is no dialogue and you have to figure out everything yourself, but there's so little reward that I have to confess, I didn't finish this game myself. I don't even know if anyone has before. There are like 4 videos about this game on the English-speaking internet, and the only indication there is indeed an ending is this one, where the screen just kind of goes red and the game stops. I'm sorry, I just can't play this anymore. There's so little documentation on this game that I really don't feel compelled to continue. You really need to play it for yourself to understand how dry it all is. It has 1 Steam review. 1. More interesting than the game itself is its page description. Apparently this game is about climate change? There are a lot of factories present here, so I suppose that's what Roman was going for? There are connections to FunnyPizzaLand, however. You can see an advert for Pedro's Pizza Restaurant, and a newspaper that reveals the game takes place on either the 2nd of January or 1st of February 2421, when the world apparently collapses. Then who printed this paper? Overall, Gobbo just isn't interesting or fascinating, it simply is. And what it isn't it. At least to me. I hate being harsh in indie games, but I must not tell a lie. I did simply not enjoy Gobbo. There are connections, or at least references to FunnyPizzaLand, but Roman himself describes this game as a spiritual sequel more than anything else, so unless given reasons to prove otherwise, Gobbo Goes is not what we're looking for to explain FunnyPizzaLand. It's just another game Roman released. Now, the year is still 2012. Roman uploaded FunnyPizzaLand and Gobbo Go's adventures to itch.io. FunnyPizzaLand has gotten some obscure coverage, but nothing major later on. People discuss the unknowable vibes and freakishness of FPL, debating if it was truly made in 2002. Roman still claims it was for his YouTube channel and itch.io pages, but skeptics remain. Popular YouTubers play the game, attracting more and more attention to it. People debate if the game has meaning, if Pedro's hideous journey could be a metaphor for something. If everything here was solely made for the expression of art, what does global media monster even mean? People would ponder this for years. Roman's internet activity remained quiet, but not dead. Every so often, he would update his channel with a video showcasing very short games he's made over the years. Some mobile games that I'm not sure if they ever came out, even a game where you feed Fat Princess until she dies that allegedly came out in 2004. The trail seemed to end there. Interest in FunnyPizzaLand seemed to fizzle and die, with Reddit and largely the world believing it was an indie game created in 2011, replicating an early 2000s CGI fever dream, until Roman uploaded another video on February 12th, 2021, simply called FunnyPizzaLand, showcasing a piece of art with a vastly different art style. While the video didn't gain a lot of buzz, the extremely small sect of people still following Roman's greasy masterpiece were rebaked. Okay, that's a stretch, even for me. On May 22nd, 2022, FunnyPizzaLand 2's trailer shadow dropped out of nowhere, aiming for an immediate Steam release on October 10th of the same year. After years of silence, Roman returned and decided to bring the first pizza game to Steam years after itch.io obscurity. What inspired this decision to not only port the first game, but to create a sequel 20 years after the original release, if he's to be believed? Well, only one way to find out.
Fools! Haven't you ever heard of sequels?
Now this is a title screen. A slice of pizza for the cursor, with visible stink lines, and the quit option being called, "Let me out of here." FunnyPizzaLand 2, The Last Supper, is a radically different sequel. It's instead a point-and-click game, much like Gobbo. But unlike Gobbo, it's much more traditional. You play as Pedro, but not that Pedro, but his ancestor, Pedro Jose Vasquez de la Corte, in the year 1632, which is around 400 years before the original game, meaning FunnyPizzaLand 1 takes place in at least the early 2000s, possibly in 2002. Why are we playing as Pedro again? Well, it turns out this Pedro is the royal cook of the King of Pizzaland, and he wants to cook his ultimate pizza invention, the veggie double cheese pizza. That might sound gross, but if that veggie's broccoli, then Pedro's cooking something delicious. Except if it's bell peppers. Bell peppers are disgusting, and any comments you leave below otherwise shall be resulting in your immediate swatting and death. But Pedro can't cook it because his pizza oven is dirty, so our journey to find the proper cleaning equipment begins. Let's discuss the two most important topics of the game right here and now: art and moon logic. The art feels much more restrained than Gobbo. It's almost downright traditional. There are consistent roads and landmarks that actually make sense, but it has a kind of webcomic art style, if that makes any sense, with flat shading and washed out colors. It reminds me a lot of Crash Twinsanity's concept artist Keith Webb's art. Anatomy is secondary to swag here, and Pedro is the biggest example of that. He is disgusting, in a sense most literal, but in a charming way, like a mascot of an obscure pizza restaurant. The design of the 1600s Pizzaland is super intriguing. It's one part medieval village, but also post-apocalyptic. Broken churches and ruins are everywhere. Ancient temples sit undisturbed. There are undocumented wildland that even Pedro fears treading. The nation is an island surrounded by lonely water, its mountaintops peeking into the murky heavens. The land feels forgotten, like no one picked up a pizza left on a doorstep. The character designs are just as stylistically hideous as per tradition, so seeing a normally rendered woman feels alien. The exact location of Pizzaland is by far one of the stranger aspects of the game, if not the entire Pizzaland continuity. Pizzaland feels very time-locked. It has shades of European history, but also modern slang. Characters verbally say lol. Pedro can somehow speak in emojis. Countries like El Salvador and China are mentioned casually, but there are even greater hints towards history being messed up at the very end of the game. This all aids in making Pizzaland feel very distinct and ripped across time, but visuals can only lift so much. What is this moon logic I was referring to? Well, Gobbo is really good at being too confusing to actually enjoy playing, but where does FunnyPizzaLand 2 land on that radar? There is dialogue. A lot of it actually, and it's usually pretty funny. Pedro feels just insane enough to fit in, but rational enough to lead a 90s point-and-click game. By the way some of these puzzles are structured and just generally how the game works can lead to a lot of confusion. There's finally an inventory system. You have your interaction options: use, pick up, talk to, and look at. All of these are self-explanatory. And just me saying point and click should conjure images of using various items to solve puzzles. But some of these puzzles are outrageous and make me think me go and take me own life. There's a section where you need to use some bolt cutters to obtain this oil canister, but this cardinal won't let you do it. So you need to distract him by walking past this garbage can and letting the rats that escape from it frighten him. But you have a 2-second window to cut the chain. 2 seconds to quickly press use with and then get the cursor to the item. It's not as easy as it sounds, and you have to pick it up manually in the same way right after. Why weren't these rats just programmed to create a fear state in this guy is beyond me, but there are so many puzzles that, while aren't mind-bending or even challenging, are just logistically baffling. Not all is woe, however, some are fun. Throwing a medicine ball at an old statue, missing the shot but still solving the puzzle is fun, and feeding the drunken gardener mosquito juice until he sobers up enough to tell us where a key is we need to find is fun and elicits a warm chuckle from me. Point and clicks are infamous for their moon logic, but I don't think FunnyPizzaLand 2 is the worst offender of that. Certainly not. It's more just odd than anything else. Like, half the locations you need to be on are on roads that are kinda difficult to see. Playtime should only last you around a half hour if you know what you're doing, but in Roman's own words, a lifetime for bad players. This is not a demanding game, but you will be spending a lot of time wandering around, wondering where to go and what to do. But I think the omission of a memo or hints isn't an exact flaw. The game is very small scope, so there aren't a ton of areas to wander around in for too long, and those areas only last a single screen, so you won't be tearing your hair out like it's Darkseid. I don't really want to do a step-by-step walkthrough because it wouldn't be terribly interesting to tell you where every single item goes and where to find it, but I do want to highlight specific moments that detail the story and vibes. Easily my favorite parts. In the beginning of the game, you have to get into a cave to meet this guy, known as Box Guy. Sorry, apparently it's a gramophone. We need his mop to clean our oven, but he won't give it to us unless we obtain something called a morag mushroom. Sound familiar? This is our actual quest of the game, and it takes us everywhere. But this encounter with Boxman is downright eerie. This figure crushed into such a tiny box, and the music that plays is so sinister, downright terrifying. Roman's ability to make such simple, looping, but atmospheric music is perhaps the most underrated trait in an underrated creator. The music of this game perfectly sets the mood, even if it's unconventional, and it's a real shame there are no online rips of it. The cave area is just behind Pedro's pizza shop. basically his house, pictures of monsters and a shrine dedicated to an old man lingering in the background, taunting us. It's not until the very end of the game are we able to figure out where the location of the Morag mushroom is, inside of the PizzaLand catacombs. A location I'm 99% sure exists in the first game, but we must descend all the way down. We hear a familiar track, except it seems to be extended now, like we get to see a whole new dimension of it for the first time, just as we see the new dimensions of FunnyPizzaLand. We keep going down, darker, deeper. Our sprite gets smaller, as the truly unfathomable scope of the catacombs revealed themselves like a spool of string unraveling. Who built these catacombs? Was it the king of Pizzaland whom Pedro serves? Or perhaps was this structure here since the beginning of the world, and shall it remain till its end? We reach what seems like the very bottom, a room containing countless furnaces, but also a sign that says World Wide Web. In 1632, there are hints of the World Wide Web, the internet. But take a step back and remember our opening area. Something has been drawn to the wall of Pedro's restaurant, the global media monster, but no mention of him is explicit, so you would think that he simply didn't exist because the internet didn't exist, let alone television. But what is the sign in this catacombs? Was it just a throwaway gag? Or is the game implying that the internet and television and mass electronic entertainment was alive in some form of the 1600s, or even before that, since it's stuffed away into the depths of the catacombs? Before we can think about it anymore, we make it out to the other side. But don't be fooled, the catacombs don't end there. But the roar of a completely unseen monster scares Pedro off from exploring any further. The catacombs are dripping with mystery, intrigue, and conspiracy. A literal pizza pie gate, if you will. When we get to the other side, we stumble across a game of poker, led by none other than the Boxman, as well as the CEO of cages, like metal cages in this universe. The other two guys' exact roles are unclear, but what's unfolding in front of our eyes is a card game between the absolute elite of the land, the rich and the powerful. While they play, they talk about their schemes for making money, their plans to steal the gold of Pizza Kingdom's king for themselves. Make no mistake, they're planning a coup. Pedro is pretty upset at Boxman, so we decide to rig the game. Going inside the shack, we make some preparations. We grab some red chili peppers, but we have to bring them to this flame to dry them out, then back to the shack to crush into chili powder. Why? Oh, you'll see. Yes, you do have to figure this out on your own. Then you grab a stack of playing cards from the cupboard, sneak back to the poker game, and you can shuffle the other two guys' decks, not to make them lose, but to make them win, so that Boxman has to leave because the loser of the card game has to refill the wine bottle. Run after him and make sure to save, because this segment has no tolerance for failure. Use the wall to climb it and peer into the window. It turns out that Boxman has had the last Morag mushroom in existence, the very thing he sent us on our quest for, and he claims that it will somehow give him ultimate power over the universe. He leaves for a bathroom break, and you have to act fast. Sprinkle the chili powder on the mushroom within a 10-second window. If you don't, then he returns to the poker game, and you have to do that entire card setup all over again. Once we climb the roof, we find Boxman and the master he serves, called the Medicine Man. With one of the Medicine Man's cocktails on the mushroom, they might hold the power to take over Pizzaland, as according to ancient prophecy. But that same scripture clearly states you shouldn't mix it with chili pepper. So, the Medicine Man turns into some kind of monster, but electrocutes and kills the Boxman on the spot, then vanishes into thin air? It's unclear if that means he died or left or was teleported away, but he doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. Pedro can finally borrow the mop to clean his oven and cook his veggie double cheese pizza, ending the game. We get a little view of what it looks like an art museum, paintings depicting Pedro's journey, and a gramophone that we should know about already. So this game is kind of a mouthful. I've explained my thoughts on it well enough, but discussion about this game is so sparse already, let alone knowledge of its existence. I think it's a totally fine, even fun experience, but I do feel like there's something lost with the transition from art style. There are scattered moments of disturbance in the raw ambience featured, but it doesn't entirely have the vibes, if you know what I mean. The first game just captured something raw, primitive, unearthly, and unexplored. Such a wildly specific genre of disturbance and creative freedom that almost can't be replicated. FunnyPizzaLand 2 adds a shocking amount of depth to FunnyPizzaLand's lore and continuity. 2 takes place 400 years before 1, and elements like Pedro's apparent family, the mysterious power of the Morak, which is either a shared name between creatures or somehow the mushroom became sentient in the 400 years since, the catacombs, the existence of the internet, and of course the global media monster, which was at least hinted at the very beginning, possibly by someone or something trying to bring about its existence through unknown means. Exactly what happened between those 400 years is a mystery, but 1 looks so much more desolate, destroyed, and lonely than 2. Pizzaland looked at least like a functioning state. 1's Pizzaland is a hellscape with almost no one in it. Perhaps that's a quirk of the art style more than entirely cohesive lore. These games were made 20 years apart, allegedly. That's still the most important question we still haven't answered to this day. When did FunnyPizzaLand even come out? It's absolutely central to the entire video. It defines and contextualizes everything we've seen this far. The sequel didn't bring much attention to the franchise, but it deepened its lore and depth, and made Roman's games just that more distinct and known. He came back in a major way in 2022 upon the sequel's release, putting his game on Steam, so fresh eyes were set upon his work. His website became consistently updated, but even still, we're no further to discovering the truth of these games. Their meaning, if they have meaning at all, is still completely unknown. The only thing left to do was to try and contact Roman himself to see if the man would respond. Things aren't looking super hopeful. It's currently 2024 and there's no sign of... Oh, sorry, I got an email. Let me check that. Oh! So, Roman responded. I can't say I was actually expecting that. Hi Peter, thanks for reaching out to me. You have a great channel and good taste regarding video games, really. Well, I'm grown up with the games from the 16 and even 8-bit era, and therefore I got my inspiration for my stuff mostly from these titles, where you can probably see them in FunnyPizzaLand 1 and 2. Yes, an interview would be great. For putting everything together, I suppose I will have it down via email is better. So yeah, ask me about whatever you want. Here's some info about me and my art, maybe it's useful. And there's also a link to more classic art gallery, mostly showing and drawings, but the games too. Is it really that simple? For a game series with such mystery surrounding it, did no one else just ask the creator? I looked up and down for any kind of interview or exploration, but it seems like I might be the only man alive to just ask. And for this exclusive honor, I asked him a handful of questions. Roman is a much more interesting figure than anticipated. Born in 1978, Roman was raised in Munich, Germany. Ever since his childhood, Roman was already interested in the creative arts, pursuing graphic design right out of school. He began to make a name for himself as an artist doing portraits and commissioned works, heavily inspired by the graffiti he saw on the streets and surrealism. Much of his more traditional works are a result of being self-taught by studying the masters of old, Picasso, Michelangelo, and others. This was all happening in the late 90s, when home computers were really beginning to pick up and become mainstream. Roman began to experiment with the computer as a form of artistic expression, aware of and inspired by art projects, films, and video games. Knowing all of this, we can really start to assemble the true understanding of who Roman is as an artist, and what FunnyPizzaLand is as a series. You won't hear this from any other video, so drop a like and sub if you didn't already. My first question, of course, was what everyone was wondering. Was the game truly made in 2002? Many people say it was only available online starting 2011-2012, but the year 2002 is mentioned many times. How did you go about creating FunnyPizzaLand in 2002? I'm so curious as to how a thing would be achieved by an independent creator back then. Roman's response was illuminating, to say the least. Yes, it definitely was. Check the date of the photos. 10 years later, I put it on itch.io, that's all. Back in the days, I was a video art and painted a lot, very Cubist and Picasso style, both you can see in the introduction of FunnyPizzaLand 1. I had no idea how to make a game nor any experience in this field. but I wanted to make one, in my own way of course. And this is what came out. I bought a book called Game Design from X Games. There was no tutorial out there for this job, no YouTube, no Unity, etc. Nothing. It was possible to order the game on CD via online form, and I did absolutely everything myself. The website, burning the discs, everything.
We have our answer right here, folks. The debate is settled. The dust has been cleared, painted black and white, crystal clear. FunnyPizzaLand came out in 2002. Not 2011, not 2012, 2002. The reason why we haven't seen online mention of FunnyPizzaLand because 2011 is because it was only distributed through very limited means. You had to order the game and have it physically be sent to you. And lo and behold, the Internet Archive confirms this. There are screenshots of Roman's FunnyPizzaLand website that was launched in 2002. You can even see the remains of the ordering page. The website seemed to have been shut down in 2008, and the game was only uploaded online in 2012 on itch.io, right when it was discovered. I was not able to find any existing photographs or evidence or any kind of CD being shipped out, but this explanation makes a lot more sense in retrospect. In 2002, was it really possible to upload a game around a gigabyte to your personal website? I'm honestly not sure, and since most of my audience was born in 2008, we'll have to rely on the wisdom of a 90s baby to figure that one out. I highly doubt Roman intentionally created dozens of fake Internet Archive pages just to prop up the aesthetic of being made in 2002, as well as using several antiquated software even by 2011 standards. So, beyond a shadow of a doubt, to me, he was always telling the truth. FunnyPizzaLand was released in 2002. There was actually a demo called FunnyPizzaLand 2D released on the website, an extremely small snippet of the game. He even provided some pictures of the development process in his reply email, and they're fascinating. Conceptual work for the game began around late 1999 to early 2000. The very early mainstream internet was a very different place. There was no YouTube or any video tutorials on this. So Roman had to physically buy and read a book on game design and learn software the hard way. That's why the game looks the way it does. It was a beginner's 3D project coming to life. Inside his games are mini 3D movies he composed himself before the creation of the game, likely as practice. I can't imagine how much time he would have had to spend to render all this on a 2000s computer. People really ran with the idea it came out in 2012 because of the itch.io page, and because stupid Redditors don't know how to do basic research. Type FunnyPizzaLand into the search bar and the old website will just come up. It's actually quite easy. Roman was being sincere the entire time, as far as I could tell. I highly doubt he's lying for any reason. People are just too cynical to believe an earnest explanation. And you know who got it right all the way in the very beginning? PewDiePie. He said it was from 2002, and he was correct. How did PewDiePie come out of this situation the cleanest?
This game was made in 2002.
But the fact this game is authentically from 2002 is absolutely staggering for a number of reasons. Firstly, it means Roman is outrageously dedicated to his craft, but this also means that FunnyPizzaLand predates the rise of mainstream indie games by 2 years. 2 full years before Yume Nikki was created. The game genre I loosely described at the start, the surreal, lonely exploration genre, I'm not really sure what to call it else, wasn't a thing by this game's release. Rather, it's an echo of an almost entirely lost age of homebrew computer games distributed for PC in Europe. A lot of early computer game enthusiasts would create these small experiences and locally distribute them, but Roman was forward-thinking and used the internet to his advantage. There are so many little Eurojank games that are destined to end up on abandonware sites, if they're preserved at all, but FunnyPizzaLand was saved from that fate by Roman putting it on itch.io, and later Steam. This wacky 3D game about a freaky pizza man didn't so much as inspire games like Yume Nikki, so much as it predated them entirely. In a lot of ways, FunnyPizzaLand was completely ahead of its time, and it absolutely deserves its flowers for that. My next question was, given the game's surreal and nightmarish visuals, did you have any other games or works of art that are on your mind while developing the visuals for this game? For about 1 year, I had my focus on that project only. I usually work on my stuff in this way. The characters are ugly as they are because I often made them in a technically rudimentary way. And if you have already these results as a developer on your screen, beautiful or not, you make the next step, that is working for the already existing parts.
That's how it was born, FunnyPizzaLand, for example. Step by step, it became darker and darker. There's one example I have, a variation of the intro from FPL.
This confirms a lot of what we could already guess. The game looks the way it does, rudimentary, crude, etc., because Roman was just learning the software and making the game as he went along for the most part. I mean, how good could one man's 3D models be in the year 2001? It's interesting that the game became darker and darker, metaphorically and literally, as Roman went along. Possibly fascinated by the way his mind pictured this project, he decided to keep it this way. He linked me to a video on his channel showing an alternate version of the game's ending, showing an extended version of Pedro in Duty Free, wed and with child, another son in the Pedro line. My third question, what inspired you to create video games? Creating my games is entertaining myself. I make the games I can't find out there. Video games as forms of art from individuals are completely underrated in my opinion. The computer as tool itself is literally the game changer, because you can do with it so much more as an artist creating entire games, the ultimate form of visual art in my opinion. Graphics, animation, story, sound, game design. FunnyPizzaLand is more of an artistic expression than a piece of entertainment, which I feel is something many viewers may have suspected already. What exactly is being expressed is a little beyond me, but it's a work ripe for interpretation. But I'm quite confident in my own interpretation. So that's why the game looks and plays like that. I'm not sure about the artistic decision to make the home key the jump button, but I don't know. FunnyPizzaLand isn't really fun in the sense that their fetch quests and puzzle solving and whatnot aren't going to make anyone giddy, but it's more about exploring the mind of the developer, seeing what unhinged creation pops up next. So it fulfills the purpose as a piece of surreal art masterfully well. What was your goal with FunnyPizzaLand, if you had one? Did you seek to frighten people, to create something entertaining, an artistic experience, or was it simply made out of passion? My goal with FPL was never to frighten people. It's not a horror game, only pretty expressive and surreal, and at the same time never serious, or maybe even funny instead. At the end of the day, it was nothing else, pure artistic passion behind the stage. My fourth question details this perfectly. It's not outright horror, it leans intentionally into the malformed and macabre, but it also has elements of outright humor. It's intentionally made to look funny, but also a little disturbing. I just found it odd that a Eurojank game from 2002 was able to have the same ambience of Drakengard and Galarians. I've talked a lot about how Roman's art style transitioned from his games. FunnyPizzaLand's OG's nature as a very primitive 3D game looks the least similar to his art style, but the character designs are the main standout. Gobbo and the Pizza sequel overcame this technological barrier and represent his artistic abilities much more accurately, even if I feel the crude 3D models have a charm that hasn't been replicated in his other games. What inspired you to make FunnyPizzaLand 2, a sequel made so many years after the first game? FunnyPizzaLand has always been a thing for me, and I never lost interest in making a sequel, long before it actually came out. It was just the right time for it. The market for classic point-and-click adventures was good, for example, and already technically had the knowledge to make one, and so on. Roman said he always had plans for a sequel, but he was just waiting for the right time, which he defines as a revival of point-and-click games. His skill as a game developer grew in that time, as well as the tools for development becoming significantly easier made the process far less painful. Most of the work for a point-and-click is just art assets. The basic programming is fairly simple compared to other games. The soundtrack to your games are very eerie and mysterious. How do you compose them? I was never a songwriter or something. It's only something that you need something for your game, you must have some tracks. A game without audio is like a car without wheels. That's how I learned to make simple looping melodies thanks to some standard programs. The most common working steps are copy, paste, cut, pitch, mix, fade, out, and echo. For sound effects files, it's the same story, by the way. The short, simple loops of music in Roman's games always vexed me. They were super short, sometimes only lasting literally 2 seconds. But despite that, they aided tremendously in creating atmosphere and mood. Yume and Nikki did this to great effect, simple loops sort of letting you fill the blanks, if that makes sense. Roman says he isn't a musician, so he had to teach himself how to create very basic melodies, possibly in Fruity Loops, and he could stitch them together by copy-pasting and echoes, a very slapdash way of composition, but can you really argue against it? Hall, that one track that everyone knows comes from this game, is a genuinely fantastic piece of music, despite how brief and simple it is.
How do you even describe this song? Eerie? Frightening? Mysterious? Beyond its composition, it has vibes on its side. How do you feel about people discussing FunnyPizzaLand and your other projects? Despite being obscure independent games, they are still being discussed in small circles by passionate fans, myself included.
Well, looks like the global internet media monster has infected servers all over the world, and smart people like you are still struggling with it. Lol. Just kidding.
I asked Roman if he had any future plans with the pizza franchise, or if he's gonna make any new games. And his answer?
The new game is a 2D Metroidvania, and its launching on Steam will probably be within the next 3 months. Then we will see.
Sure enough, in the last weeks of this video's production, Roman launched a trailer for a new game, Homelessvania, a Metroid speedrunning game in the style of his other projects. He added a bunch of assets to his other games on Steam to build hype for it, or at least showcase it in a way. It doesn't really seem like it's a direct continuation of anything major in PizzaLand, but rather a spiritual sequel, or perhaps set in the same continuity like Gobbo. A Metroidvania is certainly more ambitious than a short platformer or point-and-click game, so I'm very excited to see what this game has in store for us. The interview was coming to an end, and I have begun running out of questions. I had only 2 left. You mentioned being inspired by some 8 and 16-bit video games. Could you tell me some of your favorite games?
There are so many great games from this era. Most probably for Amiga and DOS especially, since I had those systems. Games like LucasArts point-and-click adventures. Games like Lure the Temptress, Lionheart, Turrican, Chuck Rock 2, and many others. It's generally the way they made games and applications in the 80s and early 90s.
Roman explains that he was heavily inspired by the classic PC point-and-clicks in the 80s and 90s, and I think FunnyPizzaLand 2 was a pretty obvious indicator for this. PC games are, and still are, all the rage in Europe, so it's hardly surprising that the genre, infamous for wacky visuals and characters and moon logic, would imprint on Roman so strongly. Through this interview, we understand so much more about why and what FunnyPizzaLand is, the mindset of the developer, but there's still something that bothers me. A character with such an evocative name, super important in universe, but still in mystery. The global media monster. With my last question in this interview, I shot my shot. Hi Roman, thanks for getting back to me. This is an excellent insight on the process. This is all very insightful to understand the internet's most mysterious indie game. I just have one more question, and it's about the global media monster. What does he represent, if anything specific at all? What is he symbolizing? A name like that is very evocative. Thanks so much for providing me so much new info. I wish you good fortune on your next endeavors. All the best, Peter. The answer?
Hi Peter. FPL was representing my own business plan at the time. I was about 23 years old, had no money, and then there was this new promising medium, the internet. I don't know how old you are, but this was the beginning of the modern internet, before with a completely useless modem 56K connection. No PayPal, no smartphones, eBay, Wi-Fi, or social networks. The planet was so much more relaxed, but in a technically Stone Age, of course. A completely unplugged world is, for very young people today, maybe something difficult to understand. But it was like this. First you made in the morning a ride with your skateboard before you later printed a graffiti near the bus stop tagged with your artist name with the indirect message, "Check this out, that's me." Then after playing some video games at home with your friends, you shut it down and went to bed. End of the day. And then in the beginning of the early 2000 years, there was this huge occasion to reach the whole world with your stuff. And you could even take money for it. It's exactly that, the movement that you play in FunnyPizzaLand. With no money in his pockets, Pedro has the chance to change his situation forever by getting the reward of the global media monster. The global media monster at this point represents this place to do so. Today I must say it became even the personalization of fake accounts, internet trolls, things like anonymous masks and endless shitstorms. Yeah, that's what it is, the global media monster. But at the end of the first game, it seems to be kind of a small Grinch and less angry. Roman.
This response floored me for a couple reasons. The name Global Media Monster conjures images of some kind of cult taking over the world via television and internet. But the true meaning of this monster is a lot more intimate. The Global Media Monster represents the changing nature of the world, how the internet completely changed the way people connected to each other, how the medium allowed for your creative projects to be broadcast to a growing worldwide audience and make money for it. Roman designed Pedro, a figure representing himself in a lot of ways. with no money and an itch to express himself to make some money, so he goes after the global media monster, a character representing the changing world, the future of artistic expression, the slow death of an unplugged world. Pedro's pizza making is a funny shorthand for Roman's artwork. He took on the internet with a crazy dream, something that was almost never attempted, putting a fully 3D game made entirely by one person, distributed only, something only done small scale at local conventions and maybe on store shelves if you found a publisher. Roman is a trailblazer in every sense of the word, and while his games are still very obscure and are likely to remain as such given their unique approach, FunnyPizzaLand deserves to be cherished as one of the great grandfathers of these internet indie projects. Period. I was just joking about the comparisons to Garage Bedroom Adventure, but they are more similar than different. But it's kind of like Cave Story, too. These indie projects, sometimes done entirely by the efforts of one person, are beyond fascinating. It's such an unmolested, exclusive view into the minds of a single person, totally unchained by an editor or conflicting creative viewpoints. These are your uncut gems. They aren't something you would display at a museum, but something you keep folded up in your wallet. You pull it out to admire it. I love to experience these games. I love them for their bugs and quirks and charms. As it stands in 2024, Roman also views the global media monster representing the darker side of the internet. Trolls, internet storms as he puts it, the infinite amount of angry people gnashing their teeth. However, Pedro still conquers the monster at the end of the day, living a light where there once was darkness. Despite everything, creative pursuit and endeavors will always triumph over rage and hate. And FunnyPizzaLand proves it by Roman's goal proving to be successful. His game became discussed, and even a little coveted, forming a small cult following. His art has eyes on it, and he got money for it, even if it deserves so much more than it currently has. My video is far from the first video on FunnyPizzaLand, and I hope it isn't the last, because more people should experience the horror and humor and heart of FunnyPizzaLand. The in-universe story is still unfolding. We don't know where it will go, if stories are even included at all, but all I know is that I'll be first in line for whatever Roman wants to do. FunnyPizzaLand is completely original. I don't think there's a single game out there like it, and I don't think there can ever exist one that fully replicates it. It really needs a full playthrough to be understood. All of Roman's games are super cheap and go on sale often. You're doing yourself dirty if you don't at least pick them up to try them out. The only real moral or lesson FunnyPizzaLand teaches us is that your artwork or games, whatever creative projects or ideas you have, can reach new heights and seize successes and attention no matter what. Even something as abstract and absurd as FunnyPizzaLand can find an audience. So don't be afraid to publish that demo you've been sitting on since forever. We're at the best point in the history of indie games. If Pedro's wacky journey can get an audience, then why can't your game? I hope FunnyPizzaLand inspired you somehow. Thanks for tuning in, brothers and sisters. And until we meet again, have a lovely rest of your day.